I waited 2 years. Amelia rasped, her cracked lips barely moving. 2 years in this place, and you're the one they send? Roman DeLuca stepped closer, his jaw tight. He had broken men twice her size without blinking. But this woman, barely standing, wrists raw from old rope, Burns' eyes carrying something that looked like controlled fury rather than fear, stopped him cold. She wasn't asking to be saved. She was deciding whether he was worth trusting. If this story already has you holding your breath, please subscribe to our channel and follow along until the very end. Drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this story travels. The night Roman DeLuca found Amelia Carter, it was raining so hard the streets of Chicago looked like they were being erased. He had driven alone. No bodyguards, no convoy. Just him and a single address written on a torn piece of paper that a dying man had pressed into his palm 40 minutes earlier. Roman had not planned for tonight to matter. He had been following a thread for 8 months, a quiet, careful investigation that he kept separate from his organization, separate from his lieutenants, separate from everyone who answered to him. He had told himself it was just something he needed to close. An old debt. An old failure that had never stopped sitting at the back of his chest like a stone he couldn't cough out. He had told himself it was not personal. He had been lying to himself for 2 years. The warehouse sat at the edge of the old meatpacking district, a part of the city that Chicago had quietly forgotten. The building had no address on any active city registry. The power to the block had been rerouted 3 times in the past decade. On paper, it did not exist in any meaningful way. That was why nobody had looked there. That was why nobody had found her. Roman stepped inside. The first thing he noticed was the smell, not the rot he expected, but something strange and human. Soap. Old food. Candle wax. Someone had been living in here. Not trapped in the way people imagined when they heard the word. Living. Surviving. Making a world inside 4 walls, the way a person does when they accept that nobody is coming and decide to keep going anyway. His flashlight moved across the floor. Neat stacks of paper. A small cot with a folded blanket. A plastic container of water. A row of pencils organized by length. A calendar on the wall with every single day marked off in small, precise X's. 730 days. Roman counted. His throat tightened. He kept walking. Then he heard her. Stop right there. Her voice came from behind him, low, controlled, carrying the particular steadiness of someone who had trained herself not to shake even when she was shaking inside. Roman stopped. He turned slowly, keeping his hands visible. She was standing near the far wall, holding a piece of metal pipe in both hands. Her hair was long and unwashed, but pulled back with precision. Her clothes were clean enough to tell him she cared about her own dignity, even when nobody was watching. Her eyes were dark and sharp, and they moved over him the way a person's eyes move when they have spent 2 years cataloging every threat in a room from the moment they open. She was thinner than he remembered. She was harder than he expected, and she was looking at him with an expression that was not relief. It was assessment. Roman DeLuca, she said. Not a question, a statement. As if she had already run through this scenario in her head and assigned probabilities to every possible visitor. Amelia, he said quietly. How did you find this place? A man named Garrett. Something moved across her face, a flicker of something old. Garrett is dead. High as now, Roman said. He wanted to clear his conscience before he went. He gave me this address. She didn't move. The pipe stayed up. Garrett worked for Victor Marconi, which means you already knew who put me here. I suspected. Now I know. That's not the same thing. No, Roman said. It's not. She studied him. The pipe lowered by exactly 2 inches, which was not enough to mean she trusted him, but was enough to mean she was listening. Why did you come alone? It was the right question. Roman recognized it immediately. She was not asking out of gratitude. She was asking because the answer would tell her exactly how much danger she was in right now. Because if I brought anyone from my organization, Roman said, the wrong person might have known before we got here. Her eyes sharpened. You have a leak. I think so. You think or you know? I know the leak exists. I don't know who it is yet. The pipe came down another inch. "So coming here alone either means you're protecting me," she said, "or it means you're cleaning up a problem that's become inconvenient." "Which do you think?" Roman asked. "I don't know you well enough to be certain," Amelia said flatly. "I knew your reputation. I knew your sister. I knew what people said about you. But reputation and reality are two different things, and I've been in this room for 2 years, so my read on people might be a little rusty." Despite everything, Roman felt the corner of his mouth move. Not quite a smile. Something closer to recognition. "Fair enough. Why did you look for me at all? You didn't know me. We met twice." "3 times, Roman said. "You've forgotten the third." She paused. He watched her search her memory. "The parking garage," he said. 2 years and 9 months ago. You helped my sister get her car when she'd locked her keys inside. You didn't ask who she was. You didn't ask why a young woman was crying alone at 11 o'clock at night in a parking structure. You just helped." Amelia was quiet for a moment. "That was nothing. She told me about it afterward. She said you were the first person in months who treated her like a person instead of a problem." Roman's voice stayed steady, but something underneath it shifted. "My sister doesn't say things like that often." I remembered. "That's a small reason to spend 2 years looking for someone." "It was enough to start," Roman said. "And once I started, I couldn't stop." Amelia looked at him for a long moment. Then slowly the pipe came all the way down. "I need you to understand something," she said. "I'm not leaving this building without my documentation." Roman blinked. "Your what?" She turned away from him and walked to the far corner of the room, where she crouched down and lifted a section of the floorboard. Underneath, wrapped in 2 layers of plastic sheeting and sealed with electrical tape, was a package roughly the size of a large hardcover book. She stood and held it against her chest with both arms. 2 years of work, she said. Every transaction, every name, every account number, every shell company, every payment made and received. I have evidence that connects Victor Marconi and 11 other men to a financial network that laundered money through 7 different countries. She paused. I did not survive 2 years in this room to walk out empty-handed. Roman stared at her. You've been building a case, he said slowly, while you were locked in here. I wasn't locked in, she corrected. The locks broke in month 4. I stayed because I had nowhere safe to go, and because I needed time to finish what I started. She met his eyes steadily. And because the moment I walked out that door, Marconi's people would have found me before I made it 3 blocks. Roman felt the weight of what she was telling him settle across his shoulders like something physical. You chose to stay. I chose to survive in a way that meant something, Amelia said. There's a difference. He looked at her for a long moment. How did you get information in here? How did you get documents? Garrett felt guilty, she said simply. He didn't have the nerve to let me go, but he had enough conscience left to bring me what I asked for when I asked carefully enough. I told him I was writing a journal. I told him it was just for me to keep my mind working. A small, hard smile. He believed me because people always underestimate what a quiet woman is capable of. Roman said nothing. He brought me financial newspapers, court records he thought were useless, old company filings. I already knew the accounting codes. It was my job. I knew what I was looking for. I just needed the pieces. She looked down at the package in her arms. It took longer than I expected, but I got everything. The rain hammered the roof above them. Roman took 1 step forward. Amelia, we need to move, right now, tonight. If Garrett talked to me before he died, he might have talked to someone else first. She absorbed this immediately. Victor's people could be on their way. Yes. How much time do we have? I don't know. She looked at him one more time, that direct measuring look that made him feel like she was reading information he hadn't consciously given her. Then she nodded. All right, she said. Let's go. She didn't reach for his arm. She didn't look back at the room. She walked toward the door like a woman who had already said goodbye to this place 1,000 times in her head, and was simply completing the physical act of leaving. Roman followed her, and as he did, he noticed something he hadn't seen before. On the wall beside the door, written in pencil in small, neat letters that he almost missed in the dark, was a single line. "He will come. And when he does, I will be ready." He stopped. He stared at it. He did not ask her about it. But as he followed her out into the rain, he understood something about Amelia Carter that changed the way he had been thinking about this entire situation. She had never stopped believing someone would come. She had just refused to be helpless while she waited. They drove in silence for the first 10 minutes. Roman kept watching the mirrors. Amelia sat in the passenger seat with the package on her lap and her hands folded over it like it was something alive that needed protecting. She didn't speak. She didn't ask where they were going. She simply watched the city pass through the window with an expression he couldn't fully read. "Are you all right?" he asked. It was a stupid question. He knew it the moment it left his mouth. "Define all right," she said without looking at him. "Are you hurt physically?" "No. I'm malnourished, and I haven't had a real shower in 6 weeks because the building's water went cold in January and never came back. But I'm not injured." She paused. "Thank you for asking." "You're thanking me. You drove alone in the rain to find me. The least I can do is be polite." Something in her voice, dry, precise, with a thin thread of dark humor underneath, made Roman exhale for the first time all evening. "Where are we going?" she asked. "A property I own under a name my organization doesn't know about." She turned her head to look at him. "You maintain assets your own people don't know about." "I've been careful for a long time," Roman said. "In my business you learn early that the people closest to you are also the people positioned most perfectly to destroy you. That's a lonely way to live." "Yes," he said simply. "It is." She looked at him for another moment. Then she turned back to the window. "How long have you suspected there was someone inside your organization working with Marconi?" 8 months, maybe longer if I'm honest." "And you didn't confront it?" "I couldn't confront it without knowing who it was. Confront the wrong person, and the right person disappears before I can find them." "So you played it quiet?" "I played it quiet." Amelia was silent for a moment. "Who in your organization knew you were looking for me?" "Nobody." "Nobody at all." "I kept this completely separate. No assistants, no lieutenants. I followed the trail myself on my own time, using resources that don't run through my normal operations." She absorbed this. "So whoever the leak is, they don't know you found me tonight." "Not yet." "Which means we have a window." "A narrow one." "Narrow is enough," Amelia said quietly. She looked back down at the package in her lap. "Roman, the evidence I have, it's not just Marconi. It goes through him, yes. But the money flows connect back to 3 men who I believe have active relationships with people inside the federal government. If this surfaces the wrong way, it will get buried, destroyed. And the people I have evidence against will make sure I disappear permanently before it can ever be used." Roman's hands tightened on the wheel. "You're saying you don't just need protection. You need a strategy." "I've had 2 years to think about strategy," Amelia said. "I know exactly who needs to see this documentation and in what sequence to make it impossible to suppress. But I can't execute that strategy alone, and I can't execute it while running from Marconi's men." She looked at him directly. "I need someone who has the kind of power that makes other powerful people nervous. You need me." "I need what you can do," she corrected carefully. "I want to be clear about that distinction." He nodded slowly. "I appreciate the honesty. It's the only currency I have left that hasn't been stolen." They drove on through the rain. Chicago moved past them, lit up and oblivious the way cities always were, full of people sleeping and eating and fighting and loving, completely unaware that in a black car on a wet street, a woman who had survived 2 years in silence and a man who had spent 2 years carrying a quiet guilt were driving towards something that neither of them fully understood yet. Roman checked his mirrors again. Headlights. 4 cars back. He watched them. The headlights stayed at exactly the same distance for 3 turns. His jaw tightened. "We're being followed," he said. Amelia did not panic. She simply sat up straighter and looked in the side mirror. How many? 1 vehicle, possibly more hanging further back. "Marconi's people." Or someone from my organization who's been watching me. He paused. Or both. What do we do? I'm going to change our destination. There's a secondary location. It will add 40 minutes to our drive. But the route there runs through 3 different jurisdictions, and it's easier to lose a tail. Do it, Amelia said. No hesitation. Roman turned left on a street that should have taken them north and instead began moving east. He watched the mirrors. The headlights followed. He turned again, then cut through an alley that brought them out on a street he knew would be quiet at this hour. The headlights did not follow into the alley. He waited. Nothing behind them. We're clear, he said. Amelia let out a breath that was very controlled, very deliberate. The breath of someone who has trained themselves to release tension in measured doses so it doesn't accumulate into something that shuts you down. They'll circle back, she said. Whoever it was, they know we went east. Yes, but they don't know where we're going. There's a difference. She glanced at him. You said that to me earlier, about suspecting versus knowing. I did. You were right then too. A beat of quiet. Amelia, Roman said. The man Marconi placed inside my organization, the one who helped keep you hidden. When I find out who it is. What will you do? She asked. Her voice was neutral, but her eyes were watching him carefully. I haven't decided yet. That's a more honest answer than I expected. What did you expect? Something violent and immediate, she said. That's your reputation. My reputation is useful. It isn't always accurate. She studied him. What do you want out of this, Roman, really? Not the version you'd give to someone who works for you. The real answer. He was quiet for a moment. I want to not be the kind of man who loses people, he finally said. I want to stop being the kind of man things happen around that I don't prevent when I could have. He paused. And I want Marconi to understand that there are consequences for what he did to you. Not because it's good for my business, because it's wrong. And I am, despite considerable evidence to the contrary, capable of being moved by what's wrong. Amelia looked at him for a long moment. All right, she said quietly. All right, what? All right, I believe you. She looked forward again. Don't make me regret it. The secondary location was a narrow townhouse on the near north side, registered to a holding company that Roman had established 11 years ago during a period when he had been planning very quietly for the possibility that he might someday need to disappear entirely. He had never used it for that. He used it now for this. He got. Amelia inside quickly checked the windows, swept the rooms out of habit, and then found her standing in the small kitchen, still holding the package. Put it down, he said gently. You can put it down now. She looked at the package. Then slowly, she set it on the kitchen table. She looked at her own hands for a moment, really looked at them the way people do when they're trying to reconnect with their own body after being in some kind of sustained survival state. Her hands were trembling, just slightly, just enough. How long since you ate? Roman asked. Yesterday morning. He went to the kitchen. It was sparse. He had stocked it once recently with basics, when he had begun to believe this search might actually end somewhere, and he put together what there was. Bread, olive oil, cheese, a jar of olives, a pot of water for tea. He set it all on the table in front of her. She ate slowly, carefully, the way people eat when they've learned to be deliberate about everything because there was a time when they didn't know when the next thing was coming. Tell me about the documentation, Roman said, sitting across from her. Walk me through what you have. She took a breath, and then she began. For the next 2 hours, Amelia Carter talked. She was precise and methodical, and utterly without self-pity. She walked him through the original audit she had been conducting. She described the exact moment she found the first anomaly, a series of payments routed through 3 separate subsidiaries that didn't appear to have any legitimate business purpose. She described how she had traced that anomaly back through 6 layers of shell companies to a central account that she eventually identified as controlled by a holding entity connected to Victor Marconi. She described going to her supervisor. She described being told it was above her pay grade. She described going back to the numbers because the numbers didn't lie and finding more. Finding worse. She described the night she was taken. She said it quietly and steadily, without drama, the way someone describes a thing that happened to them when they have had years to process it and refuse to let it be the loudest part of their story. 2 men, she said. Professional, quick. They knew what they were doing. I was in the parking garage of my building. It was 11:15 at night. She paused. I didn't fight well enough. You shouldn't have had to fight at all, Roman said. She looked at him. Something in her face shifted slightly, not gratitude exactly, but something adjacent to it. I spent the first 3 months furious at myself for not seeing it coming, for not being more careful, for not... She stopped, breathed. Then I decided that if I was going to survive this, I couldn't afford to spend energy on blame, not even at myself. I needed every bit of what I had for thinking, for planning, for building what I'm building. She touched the edge of the package. Anger is only useful when it has somewhere to go. I gave it somewhere to go. You turned it into work, Roman said. I turned it into evidence, she corrected. The work was already there. I just had more time than usual to finish it. Roman looked at the package on the table between them. 2 years. 2 years of a person, systematically, methodically, quietly building the case that would dismantle the people who thought they had erased her. Victor Marconi is going to realize you're gone very soon, Roman said. His people lost us tonight, but they know now that someone found you. And whoever my leak is, they may already be reaching out to Marconi. Which means we move quickly, Amelia said. Yes. He paused. I need you to trust me with the names of the 3 government contacts in your documentation. Not to use against you. To protect you, because knowing who they are tells me who I need to make certain this information reaches first. She looked at him steadily. You've earned 3 things tonight, she said. You drove alone. You didn't touch the package without my permission. And you listened to me for 2 hours without trying to manage what I told you. She slid the package across the table. The documentation is yours to read. I trust you with the names. Roman's hand rested on the package. He felt the weight of everything that lived inside it. 2 years of a woman's courage distilled into paper and numbers. I need you to know something, he said. When I came here tonight, I told myself it was to close a debt, to do what I should have done 2 years ago. He looked at her directly. That was the truth. But it's not the whole truth anymore. Amelia held his gaze. What's the rest of it? I don't know yet, he said honestly. But it's there. She was quiet for a moment. Roman, she said, the person in your organization who helped Marconi keep me hidden, I want you to know something about that. Whoever they are, they had access to information about my original investigation. Which means they knew what I found. Which means they were protecting their own connection to the money, not just following Marconi's orders. Roman's eyes sharpened. You're saying the leak isn't just a mole, they're a principal. I'm saying you have someone in your inner circle who has been doing business with Marconi independently. Someone who had their own reasons to want me gone. The kitchen was very quiet. Rain against the window. The soft tick of a clock somewhere in the hallway. Roman sat back and looked at the ceiling. Then he looked at Amelia. Go to sleep, he said. There's a room at the end of the hall. Real bed, blankets. Lock the door if it makes you feel safer. And tomorrow we begin, he said. Tonight you rest. You've earned it. She looked at him for a moment longer. Then she stood, picked up the last piece of bread from the table, and walked toward the hallway. At the doorway, she stopped. She did not turn around. Roman, she said quietly. Yes. Thank you for coming. She didn't wait for his answer. She walked down the hall, and he heard the soft click of the door closing. Roman sat at the table for a long time after that. He opened the package. He began to read. And with each page, each transaction record, each name, each number, the picture became clearer and more dangerous and more enormous than he had imagined. And somewhere on page 47, between a wire transfer and a set of routing numbers, he found a name that made him stop breathing for 3 full seconds. A name he knew. A name he trusted. A name that meant the threat was not outside his empire at all. It was sitting at his table. It had been there for years, and it had been watching him look for Amelia the whole time. Roman did not sleep that night. He sat at the kitchen table with the package open in front of him, and he read every single page twice. The first time through, he moved fast, absorbing the structure of what Amelia had built. The architecture of the evidence, the way she had layered transaction records against corporate filings, against payment logs, to create something that was not just incriminating, but airtight. The second time through, he slowed down. He looked at every name, every routing number, every date, and the second time through on page 47, he found it again. He hadn't imagined it the first time. The name was Marco Vitelli. Marco, who had been with Roman's organization for 11 years. Marco, who ran the financial oversight division. The man Roman trusted to keep his own books clean, to manage the legitimate side of his holdings, to interface with the accountants and the lawyers and the tax attorneys who kept the DeLuca name out of courtrooms. Marco, who had sat across from Roman at dinner 4 weeks ago and listened to Roman describe carefully, vaguely, but still described that he was getting closer to resolving an old matter involving a missing woman. Marco, who had nodded and said he hoped Roman found what he was looking for. Roman set the page down very carefully. He pressed both hands flat on the table and breathed. He had made mistakes before in his life, large ones, ones that cost people things they couldn't recover. He had carried those mistakes the way you carry something that never gets lighter, you just get more practiced at the weight. But this mistake, trusting Marco, keeping Marco close, allowing Marco access to the inner workings of everything. Roman built, this one had cost Amelia Carter 2 years of her life. 2 years in a building the city forgot. 2 years of surveillance through broken windows and calendars marked with pencil X's. Roman stood up. He walked to the window and looked out at the street. Still raining. The city quiet and wet and indifferent. He had a choice to make right now, and it needed to be the right one, because the wrong choice would get Amelia killed before the sun came up. He could not contact anyone in his organization. Not tonight. Not until he understood the full scope of who Marco had been talking to and what they knew about tonight's events. If Marco had people watching Roman, and Roman had to assume he did, then any communication through his normal channels was a signal, a location, a target. He went back to the table and kept reading. By 4 in the morning, he had built a complete picture. Marco had been running a parallel financial operation inside Roman's organization for at least 3 years. He had been skimming, not dramatically, not in ways that would trigger obvious audits, but consistently and cleverly rerouting small percentages from dozens of accounts into a holding structure that connected through 4 separate layers to a company controlled by Victor Marconi. It was elegant work. The kind of thing only someone who knew accounting from the inside could construct. The kind of thing that would have gone undetected indefinitely if Amelia Carter hadn't started pulling at threads in a completely different investigation and accidentally found the same web from the other side. Marco had known the moment Amelia got close. He had told Marconi, and Marconi had acted. Roman closed the last page of the documentation and sat back. He had been living with a man he trusted sitting inside his house at his table in his confidence, and that man had been slowly bleeding him while helping cage a woman who had done nothing wrong except be good at her job. The fury that moved through Roman then was the cold kind. Not hot, not loud. The kind that settles into your bones and stays there focused and purposeful. The kind that does not waste itself on expression because it is saving everything for action. He checked his watch. 4:17. He got up and went to the room at the end of the hall and knocked softly. A pause. Then, "I'm awake." "I need to talk to you," he said. "Give me 1 minute." Exactly 1 minute later, Amelia opened the door. She had slept in her clothes, but her eyes were clear. She had the look of someone who had learned to wake up fully and immediately, without the slow drift that people who feel safe allow themselves. "You found something," she said, reading his face. "I found the name." Her expression didn't shift dramatically. It was more like something settled into place the way a puzzle piece sounds when it fits exactly right. "Who?" "Marco Vitelli. He runs financial oversight for my organization." Amelia was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. "How long?" 3 years of active movement, possibly longer of positioning. "What does he know about tonight?" "That's what I don't know yet." She stepped out into the hallway. Walk me through what the documentation shows. They went back to the kitchen, and Roman laid it out. Everything. The full picture, the structure of what Marco had built, the connection to Marconi, the timeline. Amelia listened without interrupting. She asked no clarifying questions until he finished, which told him she was processing rather than reacting, building the picture internally as he spoke. He would have known you found me, she said when he finished. Not the location, you said nobody knew the address, but he would have known you were getting close because you told him 4 weeks ago you were close. Yes. So he's been preparing. 4 weeks is enough time to prepare. She paused. Has he tried to contact you tonight? Roman checked his phone. 3 messages from Marco. The first at 12:40, which was approximately 40 minutes after Roman had left to find Amelia. The second at 2:15. The third at 3:50. All 3 asking variations of the same question, whether Roman was all right, whether he needed anything, whether there was something Marco could help with. He turned the phone and showed her. Amelia read the messages. Her jaw tightened slightly. He's not checking on you. He's tracking whether you're responding. Each message is a test. Is Roman reachable? Is Roman functional? Is Roman in a position where I need to worry? Or he's fishing for my location by seeing which cell tower picks up my response, Roman said. That too. She looked at the phone. Don't respond. Not yet. The silence is useful. It tells him nothing, which means he can't move against us without guessing at our position. Agreed. Roman set the phone face down on the table. The problem is that Marco is not the only problem. Marconi is the larger threat, and Marco is his instrument inside my organization. If we move on Marco directly, Marconi knows immediately. If we move on Marconi first, Marco disappears before we can close him. They have to be moved on simultaneously, Amelia said. Yes, which requires resources I cannot access through my normal channels right now. She looked at him. What do you have that's fully clean? People, assets, anything? Roman thought. 2 men. Brothers, they've been with me since before I built the organization into what it is now. They're not connected to my current structure. They work independently. I trust them the way I trust very few things in this world. Can you reach them without going through any channel Marco might have visibility into? Yes. They're completely off-grid from my standard operations. Then we start there, Amelia said. She leaned forward slightly, both arms on the table, and the posture was not the posture of someone who had been living in an abandoned warehouse for 2 years. It was the posture of someone who had been waiting to be in this exact room, having this exact conversation for 2 years. We need Marco before we need Marconi. Marco has information. Marconi doesn't specifically. He knows the internal structure of your organization, which means he knows which pieces can be moved to protect Marconi's operation if things go sideways. We take Marco quietly first. We get what he knows. Then we use that to coordinate a simultaneous approach on Marconi. Roman looked at her. You've planned this, he said. I've had time to plan, she said. I didn't know the name of the person inside your organization, but I knew there had to be one, and I've been thinking about how to handle that variable for 8 months. She paused. I just needed the right person on the outside. And now you have one. Now I have you, she agreed. Which brings me to the part of this where I need to know something. Ask. Her eyes stayed level on him. When this is over, when Marconi is finished, and Marco is dealt with, and the documentation is in the right hands, what happens to you? To your organization? Some of what I have connects to money that move through your world. Not your money, not your operations, but your structures were used as a pass-through in at least 2 of Marconi's transactions. Roman was silent. I need to know, she said quietly, whether you're helping me because it's right, or whether you're helping me because it protects you. Would it change what we're doing if both were true? He asked. No, she admitted. But it would change how much I trust the plan. Roman looked at the table. Then he looked at her. Honestly, I didn't know those transactions moved through my structures. If I had known, I would have shut it down, not because of legal exposure, but because being Marconi's laundry is something I would never have agreed to. Marco used my infrastructure without my knowledge. That's a violation I take personally." He paused. "But you're also right that when this surfaces, questions will come back to me, and I will answer them. Whatever the consequence is, I will answer them." Amelia studied him for a long moment. "All right," she said. "I believe you." She had said those words to him before in the car, and he had understood then that they were not given lightly. She said them the same way now, not as comfort, not as reassurance, but as a precise statement of a conclusion she had reached through evidence. "Call your 2 men," she said. "We move before dawn if we can." Roman reached for a secondary phone, a clean line purchased 6 months ago, registered to no name. He currently used and made the call. The phone rang twice. A voice answered, rough, immediately alert. "Yeah." "It's me," Roman said. "I need you and your brother, tonight, now." A pause of about 2 seconds. "Where?" Roman gave the address. 40 minutes, the voice said. The call ended. Roman set the phone down and looked at Amelia. 40 minutes, she nodded. "Then let me show you the sequencing." She reached for the documentation and began pulling specific pages, organizing them into 2 separate stacks with the same efficiency and deliberateness she brought to everything. "The first stack is what we use to bring down Marco. The second is what goes public when Marconi falls. The order matters enormously. If the second stack surfaces before Marco is contained, we lose the ability to prevent him from warning Marconi about the full scope of what I have. How do we control the timing on the second stack going public?" "I have a contact," Amelia said. She didn't look up from the pages. "A journalist. Someone I worked with peripherally before I disappeared. She's been investigating financial corruption at the city level for 3 years. She's trustworthy because she's one of the few people I've encountered in my career who wants the truth more than she wants the story." "You've been in contact with her from inside the warehouse?" "No, I have a letter prepared." She reached into the inner lining of the package wrapper and produced an envelope sealed. "If something happens to me before this is finished, if I don't make it through whatever comes next, this goes to her directly. It contains the key to a secondary documentation set I've maintained as a backup stored with a third party who doesn't know what it is." Roman stared at the envelope. "You built a dead man's switch," he said. "I built a guarantee," she corrected. "I was not going to spend 2 years doing this work and have it die with me if Marconi's people got there first." He shook his head slowly, not in disbelief, in something closer to reverence, though he would not have used that word. "You thought of everything." "I had time to think of everything," she said. And for just a moment, just a breath, something in her voice cracked slightly at the edges. Not much. Not enough for most people to catch. But Roman caught it because he had been listening very carefully to everything she said all night, trying to distinguish between the armored version of Amelia and the real one underneath. "You were also scared," he said quietly. "All this time." She didn't answer immediately. She straightened the pages in front of her with precise, careful movements. "Every single day," she finally said. "Being afraid and being functional are not mutually exclusive. I learned that in month 2. She set the pages down and looked at him directly. "I let myself be afraid for exactly 1 hour each evening. I sat with it, felt all of it, and then I put it away and went back to work. If I'd fought the fear instead of scheduling it, it would have eaten me alive." Roman said nothing, because there was nothing to say to that which would not be less than it deserved. They waited. The rain slowed. At 5:12 there was a knock at the front door. 3 slow, then 2 fast, then 1, and Roman opened it to find 2 men standing in the early dark. The older one was built like a man who had spent 30 years making sure weight rooms feared him. His name was Daniel. The younger one, Joseph, was quieter with the specific stillness of someone who assessed everything in a room before he committed to where he stood in it. They looked at Amelia, then at Roman. "This her?" Daniel asked. "This is Amelia Carter," Roman said. Daniel nodded at her, not the nod of someone being polite, but the nod of someone who had already decided she warranted respect and was communicating that directly. "We heard you were missing," he said, "for a long time." 2 years, Amelia said, "and now you're back." And now I'm back, she agreed. And I need your help taking down the people who put me there. Daniel looked at Roman. You trust her? He asked. Yes, Roman said, without hesitation. Daniel looked back at Amelia. Then we're in. He stepped inside, followed by Joseph. Tell us what you need. Amelia spread the documentation on the table. She began talking. Roman watched Daniel and Joseph as she spoke, watched their faces move through the same sequence his had moved through, from attention to comprehension, to the particular grim focus of people who have heard enough to understand that what they are dealing with is real and serious and needs to be handled with precision. When she finished, Joseph spoke for the first time since arriving. Marco Vitelli. His voice was very flat. I know him. We all know him, Daniel said. He came to my brother's restaurant 3 weeks ago, Joseph said. Asked questions, normal enough on the surface, but the questions were about Roman's schedule, where he went, who he met with alone. Roman felt something cold move through his chest. You didn't tell me. I didn't think it was significant at the time, Joseph said. Marco has always been curious. I thought it was just Marco being Marco. He paused. I should have told you. I'm sorry. It confirms the timeline, Amelia said, immediately redirecting. Not protecting Joseph from accountability, but pulling the room back to what mattered. 3 weeks ago, Marco already knew Roman was getting close. He was gathering information to position himself, which means he's been in active preparation mode for at least 3 weeks. Which means he has a contingency ready, Roman said. Yes. Amelia looked at the 2 stacks of documentation. We need to move tonight. If we wait until morning, the window closes. Marco will have realized by now that Roman isn't responding to his messages, and he will have communicated that to Marconi. Right now they're probably assuming Roman is in the field doing something unrelated. By morning, they'll start to consider other possibilities. Where is Marco tonight? Roman asked Daniel. Daniel pulled out his own phone and made a call that lasted 20 seconds. He hung up. His car is at his apartment. He's home. He's waiting, Joseph said. He's waiting, Roman agreed. Amelia looked at Roman. You know what needs to happen? Yes. Can you do it without anyone getting hurt who doesn't need to get hurt? Roman looked at her for just a moment, long enough to understand what she was really asking. She was not asking whether he was capable of violence. She was asking whether he was capable of restraint. Whether the man she was trusting with her life and her 2 years of work was the kind of man who would let this become something bigger and uglier than it needed to be. Yes, he said. Nobody gets hurt who doesn't choose to. Amelia nodded. She picked up the envelope with the journalist's name on it and handed it to Daniel. If something goes wrong tonight, if Roman and I don't come back, this goes to the address on the front. You don't open it. You don't read it. You deliver it. Understood. Daniel took the envelope. Understood. And the documentation. She picked up the second stack. Same instruction. If we don't come back, this goes to the second address on this folder. Different journalist, different newspaper. Both stacks go out simultaneously. Joseph took the folder. He looked at it with the particular expression of someone holding something they understand is important enough to cost people their lives. We'll keep it safe, he said. I know, Amelia said. And the way she said it, calm, certain, without qualification, told Roman that she had spent 2 years learning which things she could control and which she couldn't, and she had become extraordinarily clear about the difference. Roman stood up. He buttoned his coat. He looked at Amelia. You should stay here, he said. With Daniel, Joseph and I. No, she said. He stopped. I'm going, she said. I am not sitting in another room waiting for someone else to handle the thing that has been mine to handle since the beginning. I went along with being protected tonight because we were running and I needed to think. But I'm not going to sit in a safe house while you go confront the man who helped steal 2 years of my life. Her voice was not loud. It was not angry. It was simply absolute. I'm going, Roman. He looked at her. The same look she had given him in the warehouse, measuring, assessing, reading. He recognized now that she did the same thing back. That this was not a one-directional dynamic. She had been reading him all night, just as carefully as he had been reading her. All right, he said. She picked up her coat. And just before they walked out the door into the last hour of darkness before Chicago's morning started, she stopped and said something that Roman did not expect. "Whatever happens with Marco tonight," she said quietly, "don't let it become about what he did to me. Let it be about the truth. The moment it becomes personal, we make mistakes. And we cannot afford to make mistakes." Roman held the door open. "You're right," he said. "But Amelia..." He paused. "It is personal. We both know that. The difference is, we're not going to let it run us." She looked at him for one long beat. Then she walked through the door, and Roman followed her out into the city, toward the man who had been sitting inside his trust for 3 years. Like a stone inside a river, shaping everything around him, without anyone realizing the shape had changed. Marco Vitelli was waiting at home, comfortable in the lie he had been living. He had exactly 40 minutes left before that comfort ended forever. Marco Vitelli opened his door at 5:47 in the morning, wearing a robe and an expression of carefully constructed surprise. He was good at it. Roman had to give him that. The widened eyes, the slight parting of the lips, the way his body language communicated, disoriented concern, rather than the cold alertness of a man who had been sitting awake for hours, waiting to find out how badly his night was going to end. Another man might have believed it. Roman had spent 20 years reading People for Survival. He walked past Marco into the apartment without being invited. Joseph followed. Amelia came in last. And that was the moment Marco's performance cracked. Not dramatically, not with a gasp or a stumble, but in the specific way that a man's face cracks when he sees something he calculated had a very low probability of ever standing in front of him again. His eyes went to Amelia and stayed there for exactly 2 seconds longer than a genuinely surprised person's eyes would have. 2 seconds was enough. "Close the door, Marco," Roman said. Marco closed the door. His hand on the handle was steady. He had recovered fast. Roman noted that and filed it. "Roman," Marco said. His voice was warm, concerned, the voice of a trusted advisor encountering an unexpected situation. "I've been trying to reach you all night. I was worried what's going on. Who is this woman?" "Sit down," Roman said. "I'd rather stand while someone explains." "Marco." Roman's voice did not rise. It never needed to. "Sit down." Marco sat. Roman remained standing. He let the silence run for 10 full seconds, which was longer than most people were comfortable with, and precisely calibrated to communicate that Roman was not in a hurry because he already had everything he needed. "Her name is Amelia Carter," Roman said. "You know who she is?" "I've never seen this woman in my..." "Stop," Roman said, still quiet, still level. "We found the documentation, Marco, all of it. Every transaction, every routing number, every payment you made to Marconi's holding entity, every date, every amount going back 37 months. He paused. "So what I'm offering you right now is a conversation. A real one. Where you tell me the truth. Because the alternative to that conversation is something neither of us is going to enjoy." Marco was quiet. The performance was gone now. What replaced it was not fear exactly, it was calculation. Roman could see it happening behind the man's eyes, the rapid processing of variables, the assessment of options, the searching for an angle that still existed. "You have no idea," Marco said finally, "how deep this goes." "Then explain it to me." "If I explain it to you," Marco said, "and Marconi finds out I talked, and he will find out because Marconi has people you haven't found yet. I'm a dead man. My wife is a dead man. My son, who is 8 years old, is a dead man." The room was very still. Amelia spoke. She had been standing near the door quiet since they came in, and when she spoke, it was in the same controlled, precise tone she brought to everything. "Then we make sure Marconi doesn't get the chance to find out," she said. "That's the point. If you help us close this tonight completely simultaneously, so that Marconi has no window to move, then he never gets the opportunity to reach your family." Marco looked at her. Something moved across his face that was harder to read than the earlier calculation. Something that might have been shame, if shame was something Marco was still capable of in its undiluted form. "You should be dead," he said to her, not as a threat, as a statement of disbelief. "Yes," Amelia said. "I should be. I'm not. And the reason I'm not is that I spent 2 years preparing for this exact conversation, so I would strongly suggest you stop being surprised that I'm here and start being useful." Marco looked at Roman. "She's something," he said. "She is," Roman agreed. "Talk, Marco." Another silence. Marco pressed both hands together in his lap and looked at the floor for a moment. When he looked up, the calculation was still there, but it had shifted. It was no longer searching for an exit. It was searching for the best deal available inside a room with no exits. "Marconi came to me 4 years ago," Marco said. "Not with threats, with money. A number large enough that I told myself it was a one-time arrangement, a single accommodation. He needed a pass-through for a specific set of funds, clean architecture, legitimate-looking routing. He knew I had access to the right structures through your organization." He paused. "I told myself it was a business decision. I told myself it wouldn't happen again." "But it did," Roman said. "It happened again 6 times. Each time the number was larger. Each time there was more leverage because by the 3rd time, Marconi had documentation of the first 2. I was already in. There was no out that didn't destroy me." And when Amelia got close, Marco's jaw tightened. "Marconi told me she had found the account structures. He said she needed to disappear for long enough that the trail she had followed could be rewritten. He said it would be temporary." His eyes moved to Amelia. 6 months maximum, that's what he told me. And then she would be released, relocated, given money to start somewhere else. That was the plan. Amelia's expression did not change. Her voice stayed level. "That was never the plan, Marco. You know that." How was quiet. "He told you 6 months because that was the number that let you say yes without confronting what you were really agreeing to," she said. "But you knew. You are a smart man. You knew that a woman who had found what I found was not someone Marconi was going to release in 6 months." Marco said nothing. "How much did you know?" Roman asked. His voice had dropped slightly. Not in volume, in temperature. "I knew she was alive," Marco said. "I knew where she was being held. I knew Garrett was responsible for her, for keeping her housed, providing what she needed. And after 6 months, Marconi said the timeline needed to extend, that things were more complicated than expected. He stopped, pressed his lips together. "I accepted that. And after a year..." The silence from Marco was its own answer. "After a year," Amelia said quietly, "you stopped asking, because it was easier not to know." Marco did not deny it. Roman looked at this man, a man he had trusted for 11 years, a man who had sat at his table and eaten his food, and called himself loyal, and felt something that was not quite fury, and not quite grief, but lived in the territory between them. "The people inside the federal government," Roman said. "Amelia's documentation identifies 3 contacts, names." Marco looked up sharply. "You know them," Roman said. It wasn't a question. "How much does the documentation have on them?" "Enough," Amelia said. Marco exhaled slowly through his nose. "Senator David Crane, Deputy Director of Financial Crimes at the FBI, a man named Harris Polk, and a federal judge, Catherine Voss. She handles organized crime cases in the Northern District." The names landed in the room like stones into still water. Joseph, who had been silent in the corner, made a sound that was not quite a word. Roman didn't react externally. But inside the picture rearranged itself into something considerably more dangerous than he had been carrying an hour ago. A senator, a senior FBI official, a federal judge. Marconi had not just been building a financial operation. He had been building a fortress, the kind of structure where the people who were supposed to dismantle corruption were themselves the pillars holding it up. "They're all compromised?" Roman asked. "Crane takes money directly. Polk takes money and provides information tips about active investigations, names of informants. Voss is the most dangerous. She doesn't take money. She takes favors. Protection for her brother who has his own situation. And in exchange, she ensures that any case that gets close to Marconi's operation hits procedural walls. Evidence gets suppressed. Warrants get denied. Prosecutions fall apart. Amelia was already moving. She went to the documentation and pulled a specific section from the second stack, the pages Roman had seen her organize separately back at the townhouse. She laid them on the table in front of Marco. Is this the full picture, or is there more? Marco leaned forward and looked at the pages. His face as he read told Roman more than anything he had said. The color changed slightly. Where did you get the Polk documentation? We thought that pathway was fully obscured. It was obscured well, Amelia said. Not well enough. The routing sequence left a signature that matched a pattern I had identified in an earlier set of transactions. Once I knew the pattern, I could follow it. She looked at him steadily. Is there more, Marco? He sat back. There are 2 more names, smaller, local. A city alderman who controls zoning decisions that affect 3 of Marconi's property holdings. And a police lieutenant who manages which complaints get pursued and which ones disappear. Names, Roman said. Marco gave them. Amelia wrote them down in the margin of a documentation page with the calm efficiency of someone adding items to a grocery list. All right, Roman said. He straightened up and looked at Marco with an expression that had nothing warm left in it. Here's where we are. You are going to help us tonight. Specifically, you are going to make contact with Marconi. Normal contact. Nothing unusual. The kind of check-in that wouldn't raise flags, and you are going to tell him that the situation with the missing woman has resolved. That Roman found her and the matter has been handled. That there's no threat. Marco stared at him. You want me to give him a false signal? I want him to feel safe until not, Roman said. Can you do that without him detecting that you're compromised? Marconi is careful, Marco said. He reads people. I didn't ask whether he's careful, Roman said. I asked whether you can do it. A long pause. Marco looked at the table. Yes, he finally said. I can do it. Marconi trusts me because I've been consistent for 4 years. 1 call won't break that. He looked up. But if anything else is off, if there's any other signal he picks up from his other contacts, he'll know. And once Marconi knows he's been played, he doesn't make phone calls. He moves. Then nothing else will be off, Roman said. Because we're going to move simultaneously. The moment you make that call and buy us the window, Joseph and Daniel will be at 3 specific locations simultaneously. The evidence goes to the journalist and the secondary journalist at the same moment. And Marconi's operation closes from every direction at once. You're going to take down Marconi yourself, Marco asked. Without law enforcement. Law enforcement is compromised, Amelia said. We use the evidence to remove the protection first, when Crane and Polk and Voss are exposed simultaneously, and we have enough to expose all 3 of them cleanly. Marconi loses his fortress. He becomes exposed. She paused. Then the right people inside law enforcement, the ones who aren't compromised, have a clear path. Marco looked at Amelia for a long moment. You planned all of this from inside that building. I planned the bones of it, she said. Roman is the muscle. You're the key that opens the lock. Something moved across Marco's face, complicated and layered, and not entirely readable. He looked at Roman. What happens to me when this is over? Roman was quiet for a moment. It was Amelia who answered. That depends on whether what you do tonight actually protects people, she said. I'm not interested in punishing you, Marco. I spent 2 years wanting to punish everyone who had a hand in what happened to me. And at some point I realized that wanting punishment was keeping me in that building mentally, even when I was eventually free of it physically. She held his gaze. What I want is for this to end. For Marconi's network to fall completely. For the people he's been buying to face the public exposure that makes it impossible for them to operate. If you help make that happen fully honestly without playing angles, then I have no interest in being the instrument of your destruction. Marco stared at her. She means it, Roman said. I know she means it, Marco said quietly. That's the part that makes it harder to sit here. He pressed his hands together again. If I had known, if I had understood what Garrett was actually doing to her in that building. Don't, Amelia said. Her voice was not cruel, it was precise. Don't tell me what you would have done with knowledge you chose not to have. I don't need that from you. I just need you to make the call. Marco nodded. He picked up his phone. Roman put his hand over it. Not yet, he said. Joseph. Joseph moved immediately. He made 4 calls in 8 minutes, rapid low-voiced the calls of a man activating a network that had been placed on standby. When he finished, he looked at Roman and gave a single nod. Daniel was in position with the first documentation package. 2 trusted couriers men completely outside Roman's organization, sourced through a contact so peripheral that Marco couldn't possibly have visibility into them, were waiting at separate locations for the go signal. The secondary documentation set held by the third party. Amelia had arranged during her 2 years of preparation had been activated an hour ago through a message Amelia had sent from the clean phone the moment they left the townhouse. Everything was loaded. The safety was off. All they needed was the window. Make the call, Roman said. Marco dialed. The phone rang 3 times. Then a voice answered smooth, unhurried, the voice of a man who expected the world to wait for him because it always had. Marco, it's early. I know, Marco said. His voice was perfect. Steady, casual, carrying the exact note of mild urgency that explained an early call without alarming. I've been trying to reach Roman all night. I finally heard from one of his people an hour ago. Wanted to give you an update. A pause on the other end. What update? The Carter situation. It's resolved. Roman found her. She was in bad shape, not coherent, couldn't give anyone useful information, even if she wanted to. She's been handled. There's no threat to any of our arrangements. Roman watched Marco's face as he spoke. Watched the control required to maintain that tone, that cadence, that absolute steadiness. Watched a man build a lie out of 11 years of practiced deception and direct it one final time at the man who had made him into what he was. A longer pause from Marconi's end. Handled how? The voice was still smooth. But something underneath it had shifted just slightly, just enough. Permanently, Marco said. Roman made a decision. She's not a problem anymore. Another pause. And Roman is handling the internal side. The documentation she supposedly had. There was nothing coherent, Marco said. She'd been isolated for 2 years. Whatever she had collected, it wasn't in a condition to be useful. The longest pause yet. Roman's hand moved to Marco's shoulder, not gently, not as reassurance, but as a signal. Await. Stay the course. All right, Marconi said finally. Good. Tell Roman I want to meet this week. There are new arrangements to discuss. I'll pass it on, Marco said. Good man, Marconi said. And the call ended. Marco set the phone down. His hands were shaking. Not much, but enough. He believed it, Joseph said quietly. He believed it, Marco confirmed. His voice had lost all performance. It was just a voice now, a tired man's voice. But that last pause, the long one. He's not entirely comfortable. He'll verify through other channels if he has any. Which means your window is probably 30 minutes, maybe less. It's enough, Roman said. He looked at Joseph. Go. Joseph moved immediately. Roman looked at Amelia. She was already watching him. This is it, she said. Yes. She reached out and picked up the original documentation. The complete set, the one she had built over 2 years and carried in her arms through the rain the night before. She held it for a moment. Then she set it on the table with a finality that was different from every other time she had set it down. Like she was putting down something she had been carrying for so long that she had forgotten it had a weight. It's done, she said quietly. Not to Roman. To herself. Not quite yet, Roman said gently. The hardest part is done, she said. The rest is just consequences landing where they belong. Then Marco said something that no one expected. Roman. His voice was low and rough. The senator, Crane. He has a meeting with Marconi at 8 o'clock this morning. Standing breakfast. Every second Thursday. It's on Marconi's calendar today is the second Thursday. Roman went still. If Crane sits down with Marconi this morning, and Marconi has already started to feel something is off, Crane will advise him. Crane has legal resources. Marconi can activate in under an hour. He can file injunctions, trigger protective orders on financial records, move assets into protected structures that make them invisible before any legal process can freeze them. Marco looked at Roman directly. You don't have 30 minutes, you have 20. If that meeting happens before your documentation reaches the right people, Marconi can pull a significant portion of his financial exposure out of reach before the exposure is public. The room moved. That was the only way to describe what happened next. The room itself seemed to accelerate. Roman was on the phone before Marco finished speaking. Amelia was already pulling the documentation into a specific sequence, organizing by priority. Joseph's voice came from the hallway, already redirecting the couriers to move immediately, rather than waiting for a staggered signal. The journalist, Roman said to Amelia. How fast can she move on this? She has everything she needs to publish a preliminary piece in under 45 minutes if the documentation lands in her hands right now, Amelia said. She's been building parallel research on Marconi for 3 years. This fills the gap she couldn't close. She's ready. Then we don't wait for simultaneous, Roman said. We go now. Everything all at once right now. If we go now, Marco's call to Marconi looks suspicious in retrospect, Amelia said. He'll know Marco helped us. I know, Roman said. He looked at Marco. Which means our agreement about your safety becomes active right now, not later. We move you and your family in the next 20 minutes. Marco blinked. You're actually... I said I would, Roman said. Don't make me say it twice. Marco stood up. His face had changed again, stripped of every layer that had accumulated over 4 years of deception, down to something much simpler and older. The face of a man who had just been offered something he had stopped believing he deserved. My wife, he said. My son. Daniel is already outside, Roman said. He'll move them now. They'll be safe before Marconi knows anything is wrong. Marco nodded. He nodded the way a man nods when he has run out of words, not because he has nothing to say, but because everything he would say feels too small for the moment. Make the call to Daniel, Roman told him. Tell your wife to take the boy and go with him. No bags, no delay. She'll understand if you explain it right. Marco made the call. Roman looked at Amelia. She was watching him with that expression. He was learning to recognize the one that wasn't soft exactly, but had a quality of seeing in it that most people never achieved. Like she was looking at him from a position slightly outside the moment and recognizing something the moment itself hadn't declared yet. 2 years of her life. 2 years of waking up every morning in a broken building and choosing to do the hard thing instead of the easier thing of simply surviving and nothing more. 2 years of being a person nobody knew was fighting the biggest battle of their life in total silence. I've been ready for a long time, she said. Roman made the signal call, and all across Chicago, in the last 20 minutes, before the city fully woke, things began to move that could not be stopped. The couriers moved. The documentation landed. Phones began ringing in newsrooms. Messages began appearing on encrypted channels that journalists used when what they had was too large for normal transmission. The secondary documentation set activated through Amelia's dead man switch, confirming and expanding everything the primary set contained. And in a car 3 blocks from the restaurant where Senator David Crane was preparing to sit down with Victor Marconi for their standing Thursday breakfast. Roman DeLuca's phone rang. It was a number he didn't recognize. He answered. A woman's voice, brisk and direct. Is this Roman DeLuca? Who's asking? My name is Sarah Hendricks. I'm a senior investigative correspondent with the Chicago Tribune. I just received documentation that I believe you are aware of. I have 2 questions before I can move forward. Roman glanced at Amelia. He put the call on speaker. Ask, he said. The documentation references an ongoing threat to the woman who compiled this evidence. Is she currently safe? Yes, Roman said. Can she confirm that directly? Amelia leaned toward the phone. This is Amelia Carter. I'm safe. The documentation is authentic and complete. You have everything you need to publish. A half-second of silence on the other end. The silence of a journalist encountering the living source of a 2-year story. Ms. Carter, Sarah Hendricks said, and her voice had changed, still professional, still direct, but with something underneath it that was human and real. "I've been looking for you for 8 months." "I know," Amelia said. "I'm sorry I couldn't reach you sooner." "Don't apologize," the journalist said firmly. "Just answer my second question. The 3 federal names in the documentation, you have full confidence in the evidentiary chain for each one." "Complete confidence," Amelia said. "The routing documentation for each individual is self-contained and independently verifiable. You don't need my testimony to establish the connection. The paper trail does it alone." Another pause. "All right," Sarah Hendricks said. "We're going to press. I need 30 minutes. "You have 20, Roman said. "After 20 things will start moving that may complicate your ability to publish." 15 it is, Sarah Hendricks said. And the call ended. Amelia looked at Roman. He looked back at her. And in the strange, suspended quiet of that moment, in a car, in the middle of a city that didn't know yet what was about to happen to it, something passed between them that had nothing to do with strategy or evidence, or the mechanics of what they had built together through the night. It was simpler than that. It was 2 people who had each been carrying something alone for a very long time, recognizing in each other the specific relief of not having to carry it alone anymore. Roman's phone buzzed. A text from Joseph. 4 words. "Marconi is on the move." The 20 minutes had become 12, and 12 was going to have to be enough. "Marconi is on the move." 4 words on a screen, and the entire weight of the night shifted. Roman was already driving before he finished reading the text. Amelia had the phone in her, reading Joseph's message over his shoulder, and she said nothing for 3 seconds, the particular silence of someone running calculations faster than speech allows. "Where is he going?" she asked. Roman typed the question to Joseph with one hand. The response came back in under a minute. "Unknown. Left building with 2 men. Not heading toward the restaurant. Heading south." South meant the financial district. South meant the private banking offices that Marconi used for his legitimate holdings. South meant he was not going to breakfast with Senator Crane. He was going to move money. "He knows," Amelia said. "He suspects," Roman corrected. "There's a difference. If he knew he'd be leaving the city, not heading to the financial district. He's protecting assets first," she said. "Which means he still thinks he has time. Which means Marco's call bought us something after all." "It bought us exactly enough," Roman said. "If Sarah Hendricks gets that piece published in the next 12 minutes. 11, Amelia said, looking at her watch. 11 minutes the moment it goes live. Marconi's private bankers will see it before he walks through their door. They're not going to facilitate a transaction for a man whose name is attached to a federal corruption story that's breaking in real time. They'll lock the accounts down on their own initiative just to protect themselves." Amelia understood immediately. He'll be frozen before he gets there. If Hendricks moves fast enough. Roman's phone buzzed again. Not Joseph this time. "Daniel. Family is out. Safe location. Marco is with them. All quiet." Roman let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. One variable secured. One less thing with a pulse that Marconi could use as leverage. "Daniel has Marco's family," he told Amelia. She nodded, but her eyes were on the phone. "Roman. Hendricks said 15 minutes, then said 11. We're at 9 now. Has she confirmed she's publishing?" "Not yet. We need confirmation." Roman dialed Sarah Hendricks directly. It rang 4 times, which was 4 times too many, and he was forming the thought that something had gone wrong when she picked up and spoke immediately without greeting. "We have a problem," she said. The words hit like a fist. "Talk," Roman said. "My editor. He's seen the documentation, and he wants a legal review before we publish anything touching federal officials. Standard protocol for material this sensitive. He's saying 45 minutes minimum." "You don't have 45 minutes, Roman said. "I know that," she said, and her voice carried the specific frustration of a journalist caught between the story she knows is right and the institution that employs her. "But he's the editor. I can't publish without his sign-off on something this significant." Roman said nothing for 1 second. 2 seconds. Then Amelia reached over and took the phone from his hand. "Ms. Hendricks," she said. "This is Amelia Carter. Your editor is following protocol designed for a world where the people you're exposing don't have a federal judge who can issue an emergency injunction against publication the moment they know what's coming. We have approximately 9 minutes before Victor Marconi reaches a point where he can activate that judge. Once he does, you won't be publishing anything today. Possibly not this week. She paused. So here is what I suggest. You publish the financial documentation and the corporate transaction records, right now, the sections that reference no federal officials by name. That's clean publication, no legal review required, and it freezes Marconi's financial movement. Then you follow up with the federal names in a second piece with full legal review completed. 2 pieces 30 minutes apart. You break the story in stages, you protect your institution's process, and Marconi still falls. Silence on the other end. A long silence. The kind that meant someone was thinking very fast and very hard. That works, Sarah Hendricks said, and she was already moving before the call ended. Roman could hear the change in her voice, the shift from constrained to operational. Give me 7 minutes. She hung up. Amelia handed the phone back to Roman. He looked at her. Where did that come from? He asked. 2 years of thinking about every way this could go wrong, she said simply, and how to solve each one. Roman kept driving. Joseph sent another update. Marconi's vehicle had stopped 2 blocks from the private banking offices. He was waiting, which meant he had made a call and was waiting for a response before going in, which meant he was already checking whether something was wrong. 8 minutes. He's stalling, Amelia said, reading the update. He senses something. He's verifying before he moves. Which means he's calling Crane, Roman said, or Polk, looking for confirmation that things are stable. If Crane is already at the restaurant waiting for a breakfast, that Marconi isn't coming to Crane is going to be confused. Confused is dangerous. A confused man who's compromised starts making defensive moves. Joseph, Roman said, and called him directly. Crane's location. Still at the restaurant, Joseph said immediately. He's been waiting 20 minutes. He's made 2 calls. We couldn't get audio, but the body language from our position suggests he's not getting the answers he wants. Is he moving? Not yet. He ordered coffee. He's staying. The moment he moves toward anything other than his car and a direct route home, I need to know immediately. Understood. Roman ended the call. 5 minutes. The city was fully awake now. Chicago in the early morning, the streets filling the noise building, completely unaware that in the financial district a man named Victor Marconi was sitting in a car 2 blocks from a bank calling people who were not answering the way they usually answered. Completely unaware that in a newsroom somewhere in the Loop, a journalist named Sarah Hendricks was moving with the focused velocity of someone who had been waiting 3 years to make exactly this move. Roman's phone lit up. Unknown number. He answered it, and immediately a voice he had never heard before said, Mr. DeLuca, my name is Warren Fitch. I'm a deputy counsel with the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Northern District of Illinois. I've just received a package of financial documentation through an intermediary. I'm told you can verify its authenticity and the safety of the woman who compiled it. Roman and Amelia looked at each other. The documentation is authentic, Roman said carefully. How did you receive it? Through a law firm I trust. They received it this morning from a source they won't name. The documentation, if it's genuine, represents one of the most significant corruption cases this office has seen in 20 years. A pause. It also names a federal judge who has presided over several cases connected to this office. I need to understand the full picture before I can act. Judge Voss, Roman said. A silence. You're aware of the Voss connection. We're aware of everything in that documentation, counselor, because we're the ones who built it. Roman glanced at Amelia, who gave a single sharp nod. The woman who compiled the evidence is with me right now. Her name is Amelia Carter. She disappeared 2 years ago when she got too close to this. She's been in hiding building the case. Another silence, longer, heavier. Ms. Carter is alive, Warren Fitch said. Not a question. The voice of a man recalibrating everything he thought he understood about a situation. Very much alive, Amelia said, leaning toward the phone. and prepared to provide full testimony verified chain of custody for every document and the names of 2 additional witnesses who can corroborate the Marconi to Polk payment pathway independently. Ms. Carter. Fitch's voice had shifted, the careful professional tone replaced by something more direct, more human. Are you safe right now? I'm safe, she said. But we have approximately 4 minutes before Victor Marconi potentially activates legal protection through compromised channels. I need to know whether your office can move against him today. I need an hour to. You don't have an hour, Amelia said. You have 4 minutes to make a decision about whether you're going to act on what you've received or let the window close. The documentation is self-sufficient. You don't need my testimony to begin an emergency asset freeze. You need the will to act on what's already in your hands. The silence from Fitch lasted exactly 11 seconds. Roman counted. Where is Marconi right now? Fitch asked. Stationary vehicle 2 blocks from First Meridian Private Bank North entrance, Roman said. Hold the line, Fitch said. They held, the longest 2 minutes of the morning. Then Fitch came back. I have authorization for an emergency asset review. Federal marshals are being dispatched to First Meridian and 2 of Marconi's other known financial institutions. This is not an arrest, not yet, but it creates a legal hold that prevents any transaction movement while we complete our review. A pause. And I've made a separate call regarding Judge Voss. She will not be available to issue any orders related to this matter for the foreseeable future. Amelia's eyes closed for exactly 1 second, then opened. Thank you, Mr. Fitch, she said. Don't thank me yet, he said. This is the beginning, not the end. I'll need you in my office today, both of you. We'll be there, Roman said. 2 hours. The call ended. Joseph's text arrived 9 seconds later. Marconi's vehicle is surrounded. Federal vehicles. He hasn't gotten out of the car yet. Then 30 seconds after that, he's getting out. He looks, a pause of 15 seconds that felt like 15 minutes. He looks like a man who just realized the game is over. Roman read the text aloud. Amelia heard it. She turned to look out the window at the city passing by, and Roman watched something happen in her face that he would remember for a long time. It wasn't the explosion of emotion he might have expected. It wasn't tears or relief in any theatrical sense. It was smaller and realer than that, the almost imperceptible release of a tension that had been living in the muscles around her eyes and jaw for so long that its departure changed the entire geometry of her face. She looked younger, not in a naive way. In the way that people look when they set down something they've been carrying too long, and their body remembers suddenly what it felt like before the weight. It's not over, she said quietly. No, Roman agreed, but it started ending. His phone rang again. Daniel. Roman. Daniel's voice had a quality to it that Roman didn't immediately recognize, and then did. It was the voice of someone managing something unexpected while working very hard to sound like they aren't. We have a situation at the safe location. Roman's grip tightened on the wheel. What situation? Marco's wife. She's not handling this well. She knew some things, apparently. Not everything, but enough that finding out the full scope tonight has been... Daniel paused. She's asking to speak to Amelia. Roman glanced at Amelia. Amelia was already watching him, having heard enough from the tone of his voice to understand something had shifted. What is it? Marco's wife wants to talk to you, Roman said. A silence. Why? Amelia asked. I don't know yet, Roman said honestly. Amelia was quiet for 3 seconds. All right, she said. Let's go there first, before the U.S. Attorney's office. Roman changed direction. The safe house where Daniel had taken Marco's family was a property Roman used for different purposes, entirely a modest place, unremarkable, the kind that didn't attract attention. When they arrived, Daniel met them at the door with a look that communicated several things efficiently without saying any of them. Marco was in the kitchen. His son, 8 years old, and clearly scared in the way children are scared when they don't understand the specifics, but can read every adult in the room perfectly, was sitting beside his father, holding a cup of hot chocolate that Daniel had apparently found somewhere in the back of a cabinet. Marco's wife was a woman named Elena, dark-haired, composed in the way of someone running on the last reserves of composure, and she was standing in the hallway when Amelia walked in. They looked at each other. Elena Vitelli's eyes moved over Amelia in a way that was not hostile. It was the look of someone taking inventory of damage they helped cause even if the causation was indirect. "You're smaller than I imagined," Elena said. Her voice was very controlled. "People usually say that," Amelia replied. A silence. "Did you know?" Amelia asked, directly, without cruelty but without softness either. Elena closed her eyes briefly. "I knew my husband was involved with someone he was afraid of. I knew money was moving that I wasn't supposed to ask about. I knew there was a woman who had—" She stopped, pressed her lips together. "Marco told me 18 months ago that a woman had been relocated, that she was safe, that it was the last of it." She opened her eyes and they were wet, but she did not let the tears fall. "I chose to believe him." The hallway was very quiet. "Why did you want to talk to me?" Amelia asked. "Because I needed to see you," Elena said. "I needed to know that you were—" Her voice broke on the last word, and she rebuilt it in real time, piece by piece. "I have a son, 8 years old, and I have spent the last 2 hours understanding that another woman lost 2 years of her life, in part because my husband made choices that I gave him the space to make by not asking questions I should have asked." She exhaled shakily. "I know that me telling you I'm sorry doesn't—" "Stop," Amelia said, not harshly, like someone who has thought very carefully about what they need and what they don't. Elena stopped. "I'm not going to tell you it's all right," Amelia said, "because it isn't. 2 years is 2 years. I can't give that back and you can't give it back and your husband can't give it back." She paused. "But I'm also not going to stand here and blame you for choices you didn't make. You made the choice to not ask questions. That's its own thing. Marco made the choices that put me in that building. Those are separate things." Elena said nothing. "Your son is 8, Amelia continued. "He needs his mother functional. He needs at least one parent who can look him in the eye for the next however many years this takes to resolve legally. That's what matters right now." She met Elena's eyes directly. "I don't need anything from you. But if you're asking whether I'm going to spend whatever I have left of this fighting to make your son an orphan, no. I'm not. That was never the point." Elena Vitelli stood in that hallway for a moment that stretched beyond its own duration. Then she nodded once in a way that contained more in it than most conversations. "Thank you," she said. "Don't thank me," Amelia said, and it was an echo of what Sarah Hendricks had said to her an hour ago, and something about the repetition of that phrase across the morning struck Roman, who was watching from the doorway, as deeply significant in a way he couldn't fully articulate. "Just go take care of your son." Elena went back to the kitchen. Amelia turned and walked back toward Roman. She did not look back down the hallway. "Let's go," she said. "We have an appointment with the U.S. Attorney's Office." They were in the car when Roman's phone lit up with a message from Joseph that changed everything. Not because it was bad news, because it was the news. Sarah Hendricks had published. The first piece was live, the financial documentation, the corporate structure, the transaction records. Clean-sourced, unimpeachable. And in the 16 minutes since publication, 3 things had happened in sequence. First, Meridian Private Bank had already issued a public statement saying they were cooperating fully with federal authorities. Senator David Crane's office had released a statement saying the senator was canceling all public engagements and seeking legal counsel. And Deputy Director Harris Polk of the FBI's Financial Crimes Division had not issued any statement at all because Harris Polk had been escorted from his office 40 minutes ago by 2 agents who answered to the Inspector General rather than to Polk's own chain of command. Roman read all of this to Amelia as he drove. She listened to each item in sequence. When he finished, she was quiet for a moment. "Polk moved fast," she said. "The IG must have had something already. Our documentation completed the picture." "Which means Polk knew there was something building," she said. "Which means he's been scared for a while." She paused. "That means he might cooperate." "Polk cooperating would accelerate everything against Marconi," Roman said. "Yes." She looked straight ahead. "Roman, what about you?" When the U.S. Attorney's Office sits across from us this afternoon, they're going to ask about your organization. The structures that Marconi used as pass-throughs. They're going to ask what you knew and when. I know. What are you going to tell them? He drove for a moment without answering. Chicago moved around them, the city indifferent and enormous and full of its own noise. The truth, he said. She looked at him. All of it, he said. What I built, how I built it, what I knew and what I didn't, who I am and what that means. He paused. I told you in the kitchen this morning that I would answer the questions. I meant it. That could mean significant legal exposure for you personally, she said. Yes. Your organization, the people who work for you. Some of them will be fine, Roman said. Daniel, Joseph, the ones who are actually clean. Others. He was quiet for a moment. Others have been making choices that carry consequences. I'm not going to protect choices I didn't sanction. Amelia watched him. You're willing to let it come apart, she said. Not a judgment, a recognition. I've been holding it together for 20 years, Roman said. And somewhere in those 20 years, the thing I was holding together stopped being worth the holding. He glanced at her briefly. You changed the way I see that. Not this morning. Over the last 2 years, if I'm honest. Looking for you changed the way I see it. She was quiet. Roman, she said after a moment. Yes. Don't make me the reason you do this, she said. I can't carry that. Don't make me the reason you dismantle your life. Do it because it's right. Do it because you are capable of being moved by what's right. You told me that yourself in the car last night. He looked at the road ahead. You're right, he said. It's not because of you. A pause. You just reminded me that the reason existed. Her hand moved very briefly and rested on the edge of his arm. Not a grip. Not an embrace. The lightest contact. 2 fingers for 3 seconds, and then gone. The touch of someone who is still learning how to be in the world again and is being careful about every step. But it was there. And Roman felt it with a precision that had nothing to do with its weight, and everything to do with what it meant from a woman who only gave what she truly meant. Joseph sent one final text as they pulled up to the federal building. Marconi is in federal custody. 15 minutes ago. He did not resist. Roman parked the car. He and Amelia sat for a moment in the stillness before the next thing began. He didn't resist, Amelia said. No. Because he knew there was nothing left to resist against, she said. Roman looked at the building in front of them. Glass and stone, and the particular architecture of institutions that believe in their own permanence. Behind those doors, a man named Warren Fitch was waiting to hear everything. Are you ready for this? He asked. Amelia looked at the building. For a long moment she didn't answer. Then, I have been rehearsing this conversation for 2 years, she said. I know every document in that package by memory. I know every transaction, every date, every amount, every name. I know the answer to every question they could possibly ask me before they ask it. She opened the car door. I was born ready for this, she said, and she walked toward the door. Roman got out and followed her the way he had followed her out of the warehouse the night before, out into the rain, into the city, into everything that had happened since. Following a woman who had waited 2 years, not because she was helpless, but because she was building something that required time, and who had emerged from that waiting not diminished, but forged. Inside, Warren Fitch was waiting. Outside, Chicago went about its morning beginning to learn that the ground beneath certain powerful feet had shifted in the night. And the woman who had shifted it walked through the door and sat down at the table and began to speak. Warren Fitch was not what either of them expected. He was somewhere in his mid-50s, with the kind of face that had been serious for so long it had forgotten how to be anything else. He sat across from them in a conference room with 3 other people. 2 assistants and a woman introduced as Special Agent Diana Reyes, who worked financial crimes for the FBI's Clean Division, the one that answered to the Inspector General rather than to Polk's compromised chain. Fitch had coffee in front of him that he hadn't touched. He had the documentation spread across the table in the specific organized way of someone who had been studying it since the moment it arrived. He looked at Amelia when she sat down. He looked at her the way people look at someone they had mentally categorized as a victim and are rapidly revising that categorization in real time. "Ms. Carter," he said, "I've been reviewing this documentation for the past 90 minutes. I have to tell you, in 22 years with this office, I have not seen a private individual compile something of this scope and precision without institutional resources. I had time," Amelia said, "and I had motivation." "Walk me through the chain of custody," Fitch said. From the beginning, she walked him through it. Every step. The original audit, the anomaly. She found the decision to trace it further, the night she was taken. The first months in the warehouse, the realization that Garrett could be used as a resource if she was careful enough about how she asked. She described building the documentation layer by layer, what she obtained from Garrett's deliveries, how she cross-referenced it against her own professional knowledge of accounting architecture, how she structured the evidentiary chain to be independently verifiable so that her testimony was corroboration rather than foundation. She spoke for 41 minutes without notes. Fitch's untouched coffee went cold. The two assistants stopped writing at some point and just listened. Special Agent Reyes asked 3 questions, each precise, each answered immediately and completely. When Amelia finished, Reyes looked at Fitch with an expression that communicated something professional and unambiguous. Fitch looked at Roman. "Mr. DeLuca, you understand that this conversation is going to extend to your organization." "I understand," Roman said. "You came here voluntarily." "I did." "With counsel." "Without," Roman said. "I'll retain counsel before any formal proceeding. This conversation is preliminary. I came because Ms. Carter's safety and the integrity of this case matter more to me right now than my own legal positioning." Fitch studied him. "That's an unusual statement from someone in your position." "I'm in an unusual position," Roman said. A silence. "The pass-through transactions," Fitch said. "The ones that used your financial structures without your apparent knowledge. We're going to need full access to your books, everything going back 4 years. The cooperation will be noted. The nature of what we find will determine everything else." "You'll have full access," Roman said. "Unconditional." Fitch made a note. He made it carefully, deliberately, like a man writing something he wants to be accurate because it will matter later. Then he set his pen down and looked at both of them. "I want to tell you something off the record," he said. Reyes shifted slightly in her seat. Fitch glanced at her, and she gave a small nod, the nod of someone who trusts their colleague's judgment about when to speak outside the formal frame. "Victor Marconi has been a target of interest for this office for 6 years, Fitch said. 6 years of building toward something that kept collapsing. Evidence that disappeared. Witnesses who recanted. Cases that fell apart at the judicial level in ways that we understood but couldn't prove." He paused. "What you've brought us today doesn't just close a case. It explains 6 years of failure. It explains why we couldn't get traction. It names the mechanism that was dismantling our work in real time." He looked at Amelia directly. "You did in 2 years alone what 6 years of institutional effort couldn't accomplish." Amelia held his gaze steadily. "I had an advantage," she said. "What advantage?" "Nobody knew I was trying," she said. "When you don't exist, you can't be stopped." The room was quiet for a moment. Then Fitch said, "We're going to need you available for the duration of the prosecution. That could be months, possibly longer. Are you prepared for that?" "Yes," Amelia said. "It will be public. Your name will be public. The story of what happened to you will be public." "Good," she said, not defiantly, quietly, with the certainty of someone who has thought about this exact moment many times and knows exactly how she feels about it. "Let it be public. Let every person who decided I wasn't worth looking for understand exactly what I was doing while they weren't looking." Fitch nodded. He picked up his pen again. "One more thing. Judge Voss. She's been suspended pending review, but she has allies on the bench who may attempt to influence the assignment of the presiding judge in this case. We're taking precautions, but I want you to know that it's a variable." "I know," Amelia said. Which is why the secondary documentation set the one your office received through the law firm contains a separate section specifically on Voss's case disposition pattern. 47 cases over 6 years. I cross-referenced the outcome of every organized crime-adjacent case she presided over against the expected statistical outcome based on evidentiary strength. The deviation is significant. It's not just the cases we can directly connect to Marconi's payments. It's the pattern. Any judge who reviews that analysis will understand immediately that what Voss did was systematic, not situational. Fitch stared at her. You included a judicial conduct analysis, he said. I included everything, she said. He looked down at the documentation, then back at her. Then he did something that Roman suspected Warren Fitch did not do often in this room. He smiled. Small, brief, but real. Ms. Carter, he said. I think Victor Marconi profoundly underestimated you. Most people do, she said. I've stopped being surprised by it. They were in Fitch's office for 3 hours total. By the time they walked out, the morning had become afternoon, and Chicago was doing what Chicago always did, moving loud, indifferent to the specific human dramas occurring within it. The sun had come out at some point while they were inside. Roman noticed it the way you notice things when you've been in an interior space long enough that the world outside seems to have reset itself. Amelia stood on the steps of the federal building and tipped her face up slightly, not dramatically, not in any performed way. Just the instinctive movement of a person who spent 2 years in a building with one broken window and is not yet done being grateful for open sky. Roman stood beside her and said nothing. After a moment she said, What happens now, for you, realistically? The investigation into my organization will take time, he said. There will be legal proceedings. The cooperation will help. Fitch was clear about that. But some of what we find in those books is going to be difficult. Marco wasn't the only one making choices I didn't sanction. Are you prepared for that? I've been preparing for it since about 3 in the morning, he said. When I sat in that kitchen reading through page 47. He paused. I built something over 20 years, and somewhere in the building I lost track of whether what I was building was worth the cost. The investigation is going to force that question into the open. I think I need that to happen. She looked at him. That's an honest answer. You have a way of making dishonest answers feel not worth the effort, he said. Something moved in her face, that almost smile, the one that lived just below the surface and appeared in the spaces between serious things. I'll take that as a compliment. It was one. His phone rang. Joseph. Talk, Roman said. The Tribune piece just dropped the second installment, Joseph said. Full federal names. Crane Polk Voss. It's everywhere. National pickup within the last 20 minutes. CNN has a banner. Crane's office just issued a second statement walking back the first one, which somehow makes it worse for him. A pause. And Roman. Marconi's lawyer just showed up at the federal building. He's asking to arrange a meeting with prosecutors. Roman looked at Amelia. Marconi's lawyer is at the building right now, seeking a meeting with prosecutors. Amelia turned around and looked at the building they had just walked out of. He's going to try to deal, she said. He has nothing left to deal with, Roman said into the phone. His protection is gone. His money is frozen. His documentation is public. His lawyer disagrees, Joseph said. Apparently, Marconi is claiming he has information about 3 additional government contacts not in Amelia's documentation. Contacts at the state level. He's offering them in exchange for consideration. The silence that followed lasted about 4 seconds. Then Amelia said, He's not wrong. Roman looked at her sharply. There are 3 names I didn't include in the documentation, she said quietly. State level. I left them out deliberately. They were smaller, and including them would have complicated the federal angle, made the story harder to tell cleanly. She met Roman's eyes. If Marconi is offering them, it means he thinks they're his leverage. It means he doesn't know I already have them. She paused. Which means he's walking into that negotiation with a hand he thinks is strong and it's empty. Joseph, Roman said. Tell Fitch's office to take the meeting. Tell them to let Marconi's lawyer make his full offer before they respond. And tell them that Amelia Carter has something they need to see before they do. He ended the call. "You have it with you?" he asked. Amelia reached into her coat and produced 3 folded pages, not part of the main documentation package. Separate the way a chess player keeps a piece off the board until exactly the right moment. "I've been carrying these since last night," she said. Roman stared at the pages. "You planned for this? For Marconi trying to deal his way out with names you already had?" "I planned for every variable that had a probability above 5%, she said. Marconi attempting to negotiate with partial information was about a 40% probability. I didn't know exactly how he'd try it, but I knew he'd try something. "You are," Roman said, "genuinely extraordinary." She looked at him directly, not deflecting, not dismissing, just receiving it. "I know," she said simply. "It took me 2 years in a broken building to fully believe that, but I know." They went back inside. The meeting with Marconi's lawyer lasted 37 minutes. Roman and Amelia were not in the... They sat in an anteroom with Reyes, who relayed what was happening in brief, efficient summaries every few minutes. Marconi's lawyer laid out the 3 state-level names with the confidence of a man playing what he believes is a strong hand. Fitch listened to everything. Then Fitch excused himself and came out to the anteroom. Amelia handed him the 3 pages. Fitch read them. His expression did not change dramatically. It tightened slightly around the eyes, the expression of a man watching something click into place. "He doesn't know you have these," Fitch said. "No," Amelia said. "He thinks they're his negotiating chips." Fitch looked at the pages for another moment. "If I take these back in there, his lawyer's entire offer collapses. Marconi has nothing. He has a confession," Amelia said. If his lawyer just enumerated those 3 names in the context of offering them in exchange for consideration, that's an implicit acknowledgement that Marconi has knowledge of their involvement. That's a statement. It's not documentation, but it's a start. Fitch looked at her with that expression again, the one he'd had since she began talking that morning, the one that kept recalibrating. "You understand prosecutorial procedure," he said. "I've had time to study a lot of things," she said. Fitch went back in. 11 minutes later, Marconi's lawyer came out of that conference room looking like a man who had just watched the floor drop out from under a building he thought was solid. He walked past Roman and Amelia without making eye contact and kept walking until he was out of sight. Reyes appeared in the doorway. She looked at Amelia. "He's going to trial," she said. "No deal. Fitch wouldn't give him anything. With the documentation you brought, the federal contacts already in custody, and the statement his own lawyer just made, Fitch says the case is strong enough to go the distance." Amelia nodded once. "Good," she said. It was a single word, and it carried 2 years inside it. They left the federal building for the second time that day. The afternoon was fully established now, the sun high and the city loud and normal in all the ways cities are normal when they don't know they've just been changed. Roman walked beside Amelia, and for a block neither of them spoke. Then Amelia said, "I need to call my sister." Roman looked at her. "You have a sister?" "Younger. She lives in Milwaukee. She thinks I'm dead." Amelia's voice was very steady as she said it, but underneath the steadiness was something that had been compressed for 2 years and was now pushing toward the surface with the quiet insistence of water finding its level. "I couldn't reach her from the warehouse. I couldn't risk Marconi's people finding out she existed and using her." She paused. "She thinks I'm dead, Roman. For 2 years." Roman stopped walking. Amelia stopped beside him. "Call her," he said. "Right now. Nothing else matters right now." She looked at him for a moment. Then she reached for the clean phone. She dialed from memory a number she had been holding in her head for 2 years without letting herself call it, because the risk was too high, and the pain of hearing her sister's voice and not being able to explain was too much to do in a broken building with no guarantee of what came next. The phone rang twice. Then a voice answered, young, wary, with the particular carefulness of someone who has learned to be suspicious of unknown numbers because bad news sometimes comes from them. "Hello." Amelia's voice, when it came, was the first truly unarmored thing Roman had heard from her since the moment he found her. "Katie," she said. "It's me. It's Amelia. I'm alive. I'm safe. I'm sorry it took so long." What followed on the other end of the phone was not a sound Roman could describe with any precision that would do it justice. It was the sound of 2 years of grief colliding with 2 years of hope in a single moment, transmitted through a phone line on a sidewalk in Chicago on an ordinary Thursday afternoon. Roman walked a few steps away to give her the space the call required. He stood with his back to her and looked at the street. He heard fragments. Amelia's voice explaining, reassuring, answering, saying, "I know, and I know, and I know," to every version of the question her sister was asking. He did not look back at her during the call. But at some point, he heard Amelia's voice change just once, just briefly, and he understood from the quality of the change that she was crying. Not loudly. Not in any way she would have allowed herself in the warehouse, in the kitchen, in any of the rooms they had moved through together since last night. The quiet, controlled crying of someone who has finally gotten to the place where the armor can come down for exactly 60 seconds. And then the voice steadied again, because she was Amelia Carter, and that was what she did. When she came back to stand beside him, her eyes were dry. Her face was composed. But something in the architecture of her expression had shifted in the way that things shift when a weight is removed, not dramatically, not all at once, but fundamentally. "She's coming," Amelia said. "She'll be here by tonight." "Good," Roman said. She looked at him. "You have people to call too." "I have calls to make, yes." "Your sister," she said. He paused. He had not thought about his sister in the middle of everything. He thought about her. The way he had thought about her when she first told him about Amelia in a parking garage almost 3 years ago, the way he had thought about her during 2 years of quiet searching, the way her specific kindness toward a stranger had set everything that followed into motion. "Yes," he said. "My sister." He made the call. It was shorter than Amelia's. His sister was not someone who required extended reassurance, because she had learned long ago that Roman came back from things. But the moment when she understood what he was telling her, the moment when she understood that the woman from the parking garage was alive and safe, and that Roman had found her, was audible even through the phone's compression. "Tell her thank you," his sister said. "Tell her I never forgot." Roman relayed the message. Amelia heard it and looked away for a moment. The afternoon moved around them. 3 weeks passed before the full scope of what had happened began to be publicly understood. The legal proceedings were complex and layered and moved at the pace that serious federal cases move, not quickly, but with the particular inevitability of something that has been properly built. Crane resigned from the Senate within the first week. Polk was formally indicted within 10 days. Judge Voss's suspension became permanent, pending her own trial, and the 47 cases Amelia had analyzed were flagged for review by the Judicial Conduct Commission, a process that legal observers said could affect the outcomes of cases going back years. Marconi's trial was set for 8 months out. His legal team attempted 3 separate motions to suppress the documentation in the intervening weeks. All 3 failed. Warren Fitch, in an interview with the Tribune published on the first day of the second month, said publicly that the evidentiary package was among the most complete he had seen in his career, and that its preparation reflected a level of professional capability and personal courage that the office intended to formally acknowledge. He named Amelia Carter by name. The story ran nationally the same day. Roman read it in the kitchen of the townhouse, the same kitchen where they had sat the morning after everything began, with food on the table and documentation spread across it, and 2 people figuring out whether they could trust each other. He was there because Amelia still used the property, at least temporarily, while the legal proceedings required her to remain in Chicago. He had offered her the space without conditions. She had accepted it the same way she accepted most things, directly, without ceremony, with a clear understanding of what it was and what it wasn't. She came into the kitchen while he was reading and looked over his shoulder at the article. She read the paragraph where Fitch named her. She read it without visible reaction. Then she went to the counter and poured 2 cups of coffee and set one in front of Roman and kept the other for herself. "Your name is in there too," she said. "3rd paragraph." "I know. How do you feel about that?" He considered the question honestly. "Strange," he said. "I've spent 20 years being in stories where my name was something people said quietly." Being in a story where my name means something different. He paused. It takes adjustment. She sat across from him. Same chairs as that first morning, the same table, different everything else. The investigation into your organization, she said. Fitch told me yesterday that the cooperation has been significant. That they found things, but that the picture is more complicated than a simple criminal narrative. That's a diplomatic way of saying I built something that was neither fully clean nor fully what people assumed it was, Roman said. Are you going to be all right? She asked, directly, with the same precision she brought to everything. I'm going to be held accountable for what I built, he said. Some of that accountability is going to be expensive. Some of it may have legal dimensions I don't fully know yet. But yes, I'm going to be all right. He looked at her. The alternative to accountability is continuing to be the person I was, and I don't want to be that person anymore. She held her coffee cup in both hands and looked at him over the rim of it. I need to tell you something, she said. Tell me. I've been thinking about what comes after, she said. After the trial, after the proceedings, after all of it resolves into whatever it resolves into. I've spent 2 years with a single objective. Build the case survive until it can be used. Bring down Marconi's network. That objective is now in motion. And for the first time in 2 years, I have the strange experience of not knowing exactly what the next step is. Roman said nothing. He listened. I don't know who I am when I'm not fighting, she said. I know who I was before all of this. I know who I became inside that building. But the person who exists after, I'm still figuring that out. That seems right, Roman said. It seems like the correct response to what you've been through. To not know yet. It's uncomfortable, she admitted. Yes. I've never been comfortable with not knowing, she said. I know, he said. You plan for every variable above 5% probability. The corner of her mouth moved. You remembered that, she said. I remember everything you say, he said, simply, without performance. She looked at him steadily across the table. The morning light was coming through the window behind her, and it did something to the room. Warmed it made it feel like a different place than the one where they had sat in the dark with documentation spread between them and a city that didn't know it was about to change. I'm not good at this part, she said. Which part? This, she said. Whatever this is. The part that isn't strategy. The part that doesn't have a plan or a timeline or a measurable outcome. Neither am I, Roman said. You're better at it than you think, she said. You drove alone in the rain to find someone you'd met 3 times. That's not strategy. That's something else. It was the right thing to do, he said. Most people don't do the right thing just because it's right, she said. Especially not people like you. I'm trying to be less like the person people assume I am, he said. She looked at him. Then she set her coffee cup down very deliberately and said something that was for Amelia Carter, the equivalent of a long speech. I think you already are, she said. The week her sister Katie arrived in Chicago was the week that something shifted in a way that couldn't be unshifted. Katie was 26 with her sister's same directness and a warmth that Amelia had compressed out of her public presentation, but clearly inherited from the same source. She met Roman on a Thursday evening and spent approximately 45 seconds assessing him before telling Amelia at a volume she clearly intended Roman to hear that he had a trustworthy face. Amelia told her that was a naive basis for assessment. Katie told Amelia that she had spent 2 years grieving a sister she thought was dead and had earned the right to be naive about something. Roman liked Katie immediately. The evening. The 3 of them spent together at the kitchen table with food this time. That was real food rather than emergency provisions, talking in the way that people talk when the crisis is not yet resolved. But the worst of it has passed was the first evening in a very long time that Roman could remember sitting somewhere and not calculating exits. He noticed that. He sat with the noticing of it rather than analyzing it, which was itself something new. 2 months after Marconi's arrest. Amelia was formally recognized by the U.S. Attorney's Office in a private ceremony that Fitch insisted on, despite Amelia's preference for no ceremony at all. She attended because Fitch told her that the people in that room needed to see her, needed to understand that the abstract concept of courage had a specific human face, and a specific human history that deserved acknowledgement. She stood in that room, and she accepted the recognition with the same composure she brought to everything. She made a brief statement. She thanked no one except Warren Fitch and Special Agent Reyes because they were the ones who had moved when it counted. She said nothing about what the 2 years had cost her. She said nothing about what she had lost, or gained, or survived. She said one thing that the room carried out with them afterward. Evidence is only powerful when someone believes it enough to act, she said. I built the evidence. Other people believed it. That's how this works. That's how it has to work. No one person can bring down what Marconi built alone. But one person can make it impossible for everyone else to look away. Roman was in the back of the room. She found his eyes while she was speaking. She held them for exactly one sentence. And then she looked back at the room and finished what she had to say. Afterward, standing outside, she came to stand beside him. Was that all right? She asked. It was exactly right, he said. She looked at the street. I'm going back to work, she said. Not the firm I worked for before, that's gone, that chapter. But the work itself. Forensic accounting. Financial investigation. Fitch has already asked whether I'd consider a consulting arrangement with his office. Will you? Yes, she said. I spent 2 years discovering that the thing I'm best at, the thing I was made to do, is finding what people try to hide in numbers. I'm not going to stop doing it because it was dangerous once. She paused. If anything, that's a reason to keep doing it. Of course you see it that way, Roman said. Don't you? She asked. I thought about it honestly. I see it as brave, he said. Whether I'd make the same choice in your position, I don't know. But I think you're right that walking away from what you're built for, because it hurt you once, is a different kind of loss. She looked at him. Roman, she said. Whatever you're building next, whatever comes after the investigation resolves and you figure out what the rest of your life looks like, I hope it's something you can stand behind in the light. She paused. You're capable of it. I've seen enough to know that. He looked at her for a long moment. I know, he said. I'm working on it. The trial of Victor Marconi began 7 months later and lasted 11 weeks. The documentation Amelia had compiled formed the evidentiary spine of the prosecution's case. She testified for 4 days: direct examination, cross-examination, redirect. She was precise, composed, and completely unshakable under cross. The defense attorney, who had a reputation for dismantling witnesses, tried 7 different approaches and got nothing that moved the needle. On the day the verdict came in, Roman was in a different courtroom. His own legal proceedings, less dramatic, resolved through cooperation and plea arrangement rather than trial-carrying consequences. He had accepted fully and without negotiation. His attorney sat beside him. The arrangement was read. The consequences were formalized. He had known they were coming. He accepted them standing up. Across the city, in the federal courthouse, the jury foreperson stood and read 12 counts against Victor Marconi. Guilty on all 12. Senator Crane had already pleaded guilty to 2 federal charges and resigned. Polk was convicted on 6 counts. Judge Voss awaited her own trial, which prosecutors said was as close to an open and shut case as federal judicial misconduct proceedings could be. The fortress had fallen, not all at once. Piece by piece, the way things fall when they've been properly built to resist slowly, then completely. Roman heard about the Marconi verdict from Joseph, who texted him a single word from outside the federal courthouse. Guilty. Roman sat with that word for a moment. Then he typed back 2 words. Tell her. Joseph replied immediately. She already knows. She's outside. She's smiling. Roman put his phone in his pocket. He walked out of his own legal proceedings into the afternoon, which was exactly the kind of afternoon Chicago sometimes produced in late autumn, cold and clear, and lit with the specific quality of light that makes everything look more precise than usual. The kind of day that feels like a conclusion. He drove to the courthouse. He found her on the steps, not performing anything, not making any kind of statement, just standing there in the cold with her coat on and her hands in her pockets. Katie was beside her. Joseph was a few steps back. She wasn't looking at anything in particular. She was just standing in the open air of a Thursday afternoon in a city that had spent 2 years not knowing she existed and being present in it without apology. He walked up the steps. She heard him and turned. They looked at each other for a moment. 12 counts, she said. I heard. Guilty on all 12. I know. She looked at him. How did yours go? It went the way it was supposed to go, he said. I accepted what I accepted. The rest will work itself out. She nodded. She didn't offer comfort or consolation because she understood he wasn't asking for it, and because the thing he had accepted was real and deserved to be held as real rather than softened. That was one of the things he had come to understand about her, that her honesty was itself a form of respect. She didn't soften things for him because she believed he could handle the truth, and believing someone can handle the truth is one of the deepest forms of regard one person can offer another. So, she said, what comes next? He thought about it. For the first time in 20 years, he said, I genuinely don't know. How does that feel? She asked. He considered the question honestly, the way she had taught him to do, simply by doing it herself. Like the beginning of something, he said. I don't know what, but something. She looked at him. And then Amelia Carter, who had survived 2 years in a forgotten building by scheduling her fear and converting her fury into evidence, who had walked out of a broken warehouse into the rain and made every right decision under pressure, and never stopped being exactly who she was through any of it. Amelia Carter reached out and took his hand. Not briefly this time. Not the two-finger touch of someone being careful. She took his hand the way a person takes something they have decided to hold. Roman looked at her. She looked back at him. I waited 2 years, she said quietly. I was waiting for someone to find me, to believe me, to stay. She held his hand in the cold autumn air on the steps of the courthouse, where the man who stole 2 years of her life had just been found guilty on all counts. You stayed, she said. And Roman DeLuca, the most feared man in Chicago, the man who had spent 20 years making sure the world kept its distance, held her hand back with the particular care of someone who has finally found something worth being careful with. A woman who waited 2 years had found more than justice. A man who spent 20 years running from accountability had finally found what it meant to stand still. And the city moved around them loud and indifferent and alive as it always had. But 2 people standing on its steps had changed something inside it that would not be changed back. That was enough. That was everything.